The auction yard was sinking into the last light of day, the air thick with dust and sweat and the faint jangle of spurs. Men crowded along the fence rails, their boots grinding into the dry earth as the auctioneer barked out the next name. The sound carried sharp across the empty plains, echoing off the low hills that surrounded the little Wyoming town like a ring of silent witnesses. A red sun hung low in the sky, painting everything it touched in blood and gold. She stood at the edge of the platform, hands bound, chin high despite the tremor in her breath. Clara May looked like a woman who'd forgotten how to break. The crowd watched her the way they'd watch a wounded animal, half with pity, half with hunger. Her dress was once blue, faded now, torn at the sleeve, the hem soaked with dust from the trail. Her hair, unbound, caught the dying light in streaks of copper. The men called out numbers and jokes, their laughter scraping against her silence. The auctioneer's voice rolled out again, slick as oil. $20. We'll give $20 for the outlaw's widow, a fine young woman, strong enough for work, quiet enough for peace. A few snickers followed. Someone spat tobacco near her bare feet. She didn't flinch. At the far edge of the crowd, a man shifted, his hat brim low, his shadow long. Levy Carson, rancher, former lawman, known for keeping to himself since his wife died 3 winters back. He'd ridden into town that morning with a list in his pocket, salt, feed, whiskey, and no thought of buying a woman. He didn't even know why he'd stopped when the auction began. Maybe it was the noise, maybe the smell of desperation in the air, or maybe it was the way she looked at no one, proud even in her ruin. Another bid came in, $15 from a man with whiskey breath and a mean grin. Levy felt something in his chest turn over. He told himself to walk away. None of this was his concern. But then the auctioneer shouted 20, and the crowd went quiet when Levi's voice rose slow and even from the back. The old man on the stage blinked at him, surprised. $20 from Carson's ranch, sold. The crowd broke apart like smoke in wind. Some laughed. Some cursed. Clara May didn't look up as they untied her. Her wrists were raw where the rope had burned. Levi didn't approach her right away. He just stood there as the dust settled, the paper of sale folded in his pocket like something dirty. When she finally looked at him, there was no gratitude, only confusion. He nodded once, a simple motion, then turned toward his horse. She followed because she had nowhere else to go. The walk out of town was silent, save for the creak of leather and the low hum of cicadas in the grass. The wind came cool off the hills, bringing the smell of rain that never reached the ground. By the time they reached his ranch, the sun had sunk and the first stars were waking. The place was quiet, a spread of land bordered by cottonwoods and the dark outline of the barn. The main house stood plain and tall, its windows catching the last bits of light. A dog barked once, then fell silent as Levi dismounted and helped her down. She hesitated before taking his hand. His palm was rough, the hand of a man used to building, fixing, working, not the hand of a man who bought people. Inside the barn, the air was warm, heavy with the scent of hay, horses, and oil. Levi struck a match, lighting the single lamp that hung from a rafter. Shadows stretched long along the walls, dancing over saddles and tools. She stood near the door, still clutching the rope that had bound her, her breath uneven. Levi leaned against a post, hat still low, eyes steady but unreadable. He didn't speak. Neither did she. The silence swelled until it seemed to fill every inch of that barn. Finally, her voice cut through it, low and brittle. You paid for me. Now take it off. For a heartbeat, Levi didn't move. Then slowly, he stepped closer, the boards creaking under his boots. His hand reached for the knot at her wrist. She stiffened, breath catching as his fingers brushed her skin. The rope fell away, sliding down her arm to the dirt floor. Her wrists were red and marked. He saw it and frowned, his jaw tightening. She didn't thank him, didn't speak. She rubbed her wrists, staring at the rope at her feet like it was something alive. He took a half step back, unsure what to do with the space between them. Outside, the wind moaned through the slats, rattling the lantern flame. He cleared his throat, his voice gravel rough. You can stay here tonight if you want. I'll set a place at the table. She shook her head once, then again slower, as if she didn't trust her own answer. You didn't have to buy me, she said. Her voice carried something heavy, not anger exactly, but a kind of tired disbelief. Levi took off his hat, ran a hand through his hair. Didn't feel right letting those men take you, he said quietly. Her eyes lifted, meeting his for the first time. They were pale green, sharp even in the dim light. "Maybe you thought I needed saving," she said. "Maybe I didn't." He looked at her, the set of her jaw, the dirt smudged along her cheek, the stubborn fire that hadn't gone out even after everything. Maybe he had thought she needed saving. Maybe he'd needed something too, though he couldn't have said what. He sighed, turned toward the door. "Supper's ready if you change your mind." He left her standing there, and for a long moment she didn't move. The quiet of the barn pressed around her, and she realized how strange freedom felt, like standing on the edge of something too wide to see across. After a while, she walked to the water trough, cupped her hands, and splashed her face. The cold bit into her skin, sharp and real. She wiped her eyes and stared at the reflection in the rippling surface, dusty, tired, but still herself. Still alive. Through the open barn door she could see the faint glow of the house. The thought of warmth, of food, of sitting at a table like a person again made her chest ache. She didn't owe him anything, she told herself. He'd paid for her, yes, but not for her obedience, not for her body, not for her future. He'd bought a chance for her to stand free again. When she finally stepped into the house, he was sitting at the table, head bowed, hands clasped, like a man praying, though no words came from his lips. The smell of stew filled the room, rich and comforting. He looked up when she entered, didn't smile, just nodded, and she sat across from him. Neither spoke for a long time. The only sound was the faint crackle of fire in the stove. When he finally did speak, it was soft, almost uncertain. "You got family somewhere?" She shook her head. "Not anymore." He nodded, accepting that without pity. "Sometimes that's the way of things out here," he said. "Folks get lost, and no one's left to find them." She studied him as he spoke. The roughness of his hands, the scar along his jaw, the wear in his eyes that spoke of loss and long nights alone. He didn't look at her the way other men had. There was no hunger there, no calculation. Just a quiet kind of decency she hadn't seen in a long while. "You could have left me there," she said finally. He set his spoon down, meeting her gaze. Couldn't stomach watching a good woman fall into bad hands. Something in her chest loosened then, though she didn't want it to. She'd learned not to trust kindness, it always came with a cost. But his words felt steady, unadorned, as if he meant them without wanting anything in return. The firelight flickered across the table, catching on the edge of his badge that hung from a nail near the door. She hadn't noticed it before. He wasn't just a rancher. He'd been law once. Maybe still was, in some quiet way. She looked down at her hands, clean now, the rope burns fading to pale marks. "You think I'm a good woman?" she asked, almost to herself. He nodded once. "I think you've been through hell and didn't let it take you down. That counts for something." The words settled deep in her, warm as the fire. She didn't know if she believed him, but for the first time in a long while she wanted to. Outside, the wind had gone still. The world seemed to hold its breath. She realized she wasn't afraid anymore, not of him, not of what came next. He stood, cleared the dishes, and she helped without thinking, their movements slow and careful, like they'd done it 100 times before. When the plates were washed and the lanterns dimmed, he looked at her again, hat in hand. "You can have the room upstairs," he said, "if you stay." She nodded, her throat too tight for words. He turned to leave, but she stopped him with a whisper. "Levi." He paused in the doorway. "Maybe I'll stay till morning." He nodded once more and disappeared into the quiet. She stood there for a long while, listening to the wind rise again outside, carrying the scent of sage and rain. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time since she'd lost everything, she felt the faint pulse of something like hope. By dawn, the town would whisper that the rancher who'd paid for the outlaw's widow had taken her home, and by the week's end they'd call her his wife. But that night, in the silence between them, neither of them thought of ownership or redemption, only of two souls who'd been broken by the same rough land, finding in each other a reason to keep standing when the dust settled.